Water cooling's never been this cool. It's the title, I had to say it. It's not clickbait now.
Hey, Jay. Jay. Jay.
What?
We got work to do.
Yeah, I'm playing World of Warships. Yeah. World of Warships is the free-to-play naval strategy game where you command the most iconic and famous warships from World War I and World War II, recreated with stunning detail and accuracy. Build your fleet while participating in various game types while upgrading your ship's arsenal along the way. New players who sign up using my link below will receive an exclusive starter pack to get you up and running quickly by receiving 7 days premium time, 1 million credits, 300 doubloons, and the Tier 5 premium ship, the Exeter. So what are you guys waiting for? Start sinking ships with World of Warships by heading to the description below and getting your freebies. A couple months ago, we talked about Corsair's new Link products, which is basically how they're daisy chaining fans and stuff together. And they told me at the time when we first learned about this was that it was going to extend to kind of like the entire ecosystem where AIOs, as well as their Hydro X stuff, was going to also be Link connected. So we're going to take a look at some of the Hydro X stuff today. As you guys know, I love water cooling, and so I'm really curious as to how this stuff is going to kind of play in with that. Now, if you're not familiar, I'll give you kind of a high level here. This is one of the new fans. It's got RGB in the hub, it's got RGB in the ring, it's got RGB around the outside. But you can see right here, we've got these connectors here, and they refer to them as like biscuit connectors. It's funny, they had this whole internal code name stuff. They called it French Toast was the name of the project, and then biscuit connector was the name of the connector. Somebody was really hungry, clearly, when they named all this stuff internally. But what's really neat about it is the fact that you can literally just take two fans and click them together. And then typically what would happen is the cable would go right to whatever the hub is, and then you would have a cable going to whatever set of products you had. So if you had 3 sets of fans, you would have potentially 3 wires going to each one of those groups of fans. But now you can link together any of the devices that are in the ecosystem, and they'll all talk to each other. Because one of the things that is different about this particular cable that they came out with, and when we did the initial review, the biggest pushback from the audience was the fact that it's proprietary. But this is an entirely new thing. There's no standard, there was no communication device created, there was no cable existing to allow it to be quote unquote open. So, I mean, I can understand how everyone would definitely want like open, like open source type stuff, but you have to have it exist first, I guess. But hopefully Corsair will provide an SDK for developers to come up with all sorts of unique ways to utilize this sort of stuff. But as you know, most of these companies do like to keep this stuff close to their chest. So anyway, this is what that connector looks like. I know we've already done a video about this, but I know plenty of people are not going to go watch that video, so I want you to know how this all sort of works. So this is the only cable that you would need to carry. It looks kind of like a USB, but it's not. It's double-sided, so it can go either direction. Where is that fan? So you can have it go right that way or that way. So no more superposition USB where you gotta sit there and try 15 times to get it to work. And then if you take this and link it like this, infinite power! It was funnier in my head, okay? Anyway, one other thing I forgot to point out too with these fans when I did the initial review is there is a temperature sensor on the fan right there. It doesn't matter which way the air is flowing, it's a pass through. So if it's a push or a pull, the air is always going through that sensor, which gives you another point of data when you go into IQ to tell the system to speed up the fans or slow down the fans based on this temperature. So let's say you had these fans as an exhaust, pulling hot air out of the system. And that temperature sensor can now sense how warm that air is. If it starts getting too warm, it can speed up the intake fans and speed up the exhaust fans to have a faster exchange of air. So you're not relying on component temperature, you're relying on air temperature, which is first and foremost the biggest impact on component temperature is the air temperature of the system. So that's nice to see. We'll just take a look at the hub again real quick, if you guys haven't seen it. My most exciting thing about the Link system is the size of the hub. My biggest complaint with Corsair has always been the giant freaking monstrosity that you had to put in your system. That's it. That's the entire brain right there. So you'll notice there's a plug on this side There's a plug on that side. And then on the bottom here, we have our power, a temperature probe sensor, and then a USB plug. So you can have two groupings come off of this independently. But the cool thing is we could go from fans to, say, a water block. So this is the XC7 RGB Elite, which has the LCD screen that we're used to seeing on their AIOs on the water block itself now. So you could have the cable go right to this. We have, this is also part of the Corsair Link water block for, what is this one for? 4070 Ti. And then the same thing here with the Reservoir pump combo deal. So the thing is, you can have all these devices connected together in an order that makes sense for cable routing. So you could have your cable coming from the back of the case into the three fans in the front, and then maybe from the three fans on the back side of it, on the out, going right to the pump. So you have one trace handling all of that. Now, sometimes you have more devices than are one pathway or one direction's going. That's why you have two of these on there. So enough explaining what IQ Link is. For those of you that didn't watch the initial video, I now want to kind of plug some of this. We're gonna unbox it, take a look at it, plug it in, just see how it looks. A couple other things too. This is a 4-way splitter. This arrived with the Hydro X stuff, so I haven't seen this yet. So it just kind of looks like a mini hub. But as you can see now, you have the cable coming into here from the main hub, right? Boop, boop. And then you have 4 outs if you need to split the signal for some reason. One other thing I forgot to mention is these are magnetic. That's how they attach in your system. There's no double-sided tape or anything, they're just magnetic. And if you didn't want to use the physical splitter like that, they do have splitter cables. So just want to point that out. These are some things that kind of arrived after the fact. So we got 2 different water blocks here. We got the XC7 RGB Elite and the XC7 RGB Elite. Oh, Elite LCD, okay. So this one, as you can see, is just a transparent top. It's got sort of like an infinity mirror kind of a deal, although it's not an infinity mirror. So you have an internal ring. Kind of looks like an arc reactor thing. I don't know, Iron Man. And then this one has the LCD. So I'm gonna look at the LCD first. So what we get included in here is a quick start guide. This is gonna probably have your mounting mechanism information for AMD and Intel. That's warranty, never mind. Here's the same exact backplate we've seen them use forever. So this is for Intel right here. And as you can see, it's got little pull off stickies there. So they'll stick to the back of the motherboard because nothing sucks more than when you're by yourself trying to get it on and attached and lined up and you go to tap it on and it falls off and then the paste gets screwed up. So there's this, which really helps. Also insulated so that you don't have metal contact on the back of your motherboard. These are the different AMD brackets right there. No, wait, right there. And then I'm assuming this is gonna be for like Intel Extreme X99, X299, because you can see how they're just captive screws on there for that. So pretty basic, easy mounts. Thermal paste is pre-applied. It's actually fairly weighty. It's more weighty than I expected it to be. Pre-applied thermal paste in a diamond pattern, so when you apply it down, it will squish. I like that it's the size of the IHS, so it'll squish and close those contacts. I'm a little curious how long-term this plastic holds up. So these are typically in a water block, it's either gonna be acetal or metal, like nickel or something like, or copper or whatever. This is actually like injection molded plastic. So I'm not entirely sure how well this holds up over time. You don't have to have the fittings cranked down super tight, by the way. The biggest issue people have with cracking plastics is they over tighten their fittings. As long as the O-ring is compressed, it's gonna seal and that's all there is to it. But I do like the gunmetal appearance around the outside right here. This looks really, really nice right there. Ironically, this is not Corsair Link. Now that I look at it, boo. This seemed like the perfect opportunity for that. So it doesn't, see how it says IQ and not Link? So it does have this one cable right here. This one cable. So it's a USB-C, which is nice. I can't plug it in because there's plastic over it, which means it would be reversible technically. But it's not Corsair Link. And I feel like this would have been the perfect opportunity for Corsair Link because if it's carrying data, why couldn't it operate the LCD? Although it's not Link, I mean, the fact that it's one cable, I guess, is okay. It just has to carry information for the LCD screen and the RGB, obviously, which is why 5 volt through USB is plenty. I'm not a fan of this connector though. I really feel like they should have done a standard USB connector. That way it's keyed and you know exactly which way it goes, because the red wire on here is the 5 volt. If we look at the USB header, USB 2 header, the 2 pins on the very far left, you'll look, there's a row of 5 pins in a row of 4 pins and one is missing. That's typically where it's keyed, where it can only go in one way. The reason why it has to go in only one way is those 2 pins on the left are 5-volt power. So the manual basically says you can, as long as you line the red wire up with either of the 5 volts, you can go in the bottom row like that, or in the top row like that. Now, because these are all keyed to the left, nothing goes in the very far right. So if you do key it wrong, nothing bad will happen only because the power is not occupied, as you can see there. It's just nothing will work. So I feel like if they had just gone with the standard connector that was keyed, there'd be no questions. You don't have to read the manual. You don't have to look it up and wonder where this goes, because a new builder might look at this and be like, what the heck is that? So that is, in my opinion, a cheap move by Corsair. Probably because they figured they're not gonna be utilizing any of those other pins, so why pay for that connector? It probably cost a quarter cent more than this one, right? I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I'm disappointed in Corsair for making that decision, because that just does not seem very beginner builder friendly. I guess the plus side is if you ever lose that cable for some reason, or you just wanna get a regular USB-C connector to your motherboard or something, you can always just do that. Because the problem is if you have, I only have 2 USB-C 2 on this board. If I needed a third one for some reason, this is gonna be occupying one, right? I only have 2. You can use a USB 3.0 to 2.0 adapter, but I'd rather just use a different cable and plug it in on the back of the motherboard. All right. There it goes. I was like, just kidding. That's screen though. I've always been a fan of how good the LCD is on their AIO. Like their AIOs look great, obviously. This is getting the job done. I do love that it's one cable. Just don't love the connector they chose. So as you can see, IQ immediately was like, new device detected. Corsair is a sponsor of mine, but they send us stuff to review or take a look at, and I'm gonna point this out. It's hard to see right now, but there is an entire row of dead pixels in this screen. So I'm gonna put on a solid background so we can see it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I would be completely livid if I received this product. You know, I'm building my system, I gotta put it all together, it's finally the day, play my games, whatever, and then be like, I have to now deal with RMA because of an entire row of dead pixels. Now it's really difficult to see when you have this kind of a background going, but if you are running a solid background of any kind, obviously that's gonna be a problem. So there's an entire line going across the screen right there. Wake up! Yeah, it's like a stuck row of red and blue is on. So that's not okay. I mean, that's extremely disappointing. And then the fact that this costs $200 it's very disappointing. Now, I'm pretty confident that Corsair would obviously warranty this. It's impossible for any product that exists to not have defects. And I'm not saying every product has defects. I just mean of all of these made, there's gonna be ones with defects. Everything that's ever been manufactured has a rate of defect. It's just really unfortunate that this is one of them. It's also extremely unfortunate that this does not use Corsair Link, which was the whole point of this, and I didn't realize that till I unboxed it, but I at least wanted to take a look, and then we uncovered that it has a bad row of LCDs. Moving on, I do have the Corsair Link stuff set up, so let's take a look at, we'll do this all kind of quickly now. This is essentially the same block. It's still an XC7. It looks virtually identical. Everything else is the same. The difference is there's no screen. You can just see the coolant and stuff going around in there. So that's your inlet, that's your outlet. I mean, it's just gonna have the same lighting effects of any of the IQ devices. It's just, it's using this one cable to do it.
It's kind of like your expanse mode. I can't unsee the face now.
Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is this block would need to be at the end of the line, or you'd have to use a splitter because there's an inlet, but there's no outlet port anywhere on here. So this is the kind of stuff you'd have to think about and consider as you're doing your loop. That's also why the splitters exist. So the nice thing is, I love that it shows you pictures of the devices that are connected. It also shows you the orientation of it. That way you know exactly how the lighting and stuff is gonna be. This is just set to Corsair Blue right now. We'll just go Interstellar. Ooh, spacey. Not to be confused with Kevin Spacey. Okay, so there's that up and running. Let's now see what the GPU block looks like. I'm not a huge fan of the style of this block. Look, I give it to Corsair to just be, to think outside the block, right? To try and just think different. Think outside the bun. Think outside the pun. Ooh. But I think water blocks are really difficult to get right, in my opinion. It's very plasticky. As you can see, it's nothing but, it's only touching the block and it's only touching the memory. It's not touching the power delivery. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Even though it's a 4070, it's just it's so plasticky. I'm sorry guys, it feels very light. It's not a very thick plate either. Now again, the 4070 is not an incredibly power hungry device, but is this actually a fan? If this is really a fan, that means this is gonna be blowing down air maybe on the VRMs and stuff, but I'd much rather have, the point of water cooling a graphics card is you're touching the VRMs and stuff with the water block, which is gonna give it very efficient cooling. If it's not touching the VRMs, you're just blowing air down on the component itself, it's better than nothing, but that's not what I look for in a water block. Now I know earlier we said it was probably a flow indicator, but no, it is an actual hybrid device. I'll probably have to restart iCUE right now when I plug this in. It's a 90-degree connector. So what's happening is the fan is blowing air out to the sides, and then the air is coming out of right here and right here. So it is blowing air across the other components on the card, which is probably going to work just fine. I just would have still preferred to have the actual block touching all the components that matter. Now, obviously we didn't get any RGB lighting yet. I'm going to have to restart iCUE, I'm pretty sure. So because we're on the system-wide, what is that, Interstellar, you can see it's matching that's actually a pretty good color in there. It's not bad looking. The thing is, if you have your card like this, right, and you're going horizontal, there'll be a big old gap between your card and this thing. So it's almost like it's intended for it to be in a vertical mount. Otherwise, it's just gonna look like it's hanging off of the card on the bottom. I'm not a fan of this design. It is a bit more universal in the fact that it's easy to install. Again, I'm not a huge, I don't care for this that much. All right, moving on. Let's take a look at the pump reservoir combo. It should seamlessly connect with everything else. Now again, this water block does not have a pass-through built into it. So now I'm seeing why, okay, this is beefier than the other one. I don't know why my first thought was like, this looks like something I would drink whiskey out of. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. This one should at least have a pass-through, no? Nope. Okay, so every device terminates at the device for the HydroX stuff. So to me, that's the most disappointing thing about this so far, is the fact that what is supposed to be easy daisy chaining for the fans, and you can go again from fans out into one of these devices, but now you need a splitter, or at least a splitter hub like this, to get all these devices connected. And it would have been nice to have an outlet on the CPU block, because you could have gone right to the GPU block from it. So if we're talking about cleanliness of wiring, I just have all these going everywhere now, which is not bad, but I mean, there's just a missed opportunity here. Oh my God, the pump's actually running. So I'm not gonna really be able to demonstrate for you what the lighting looks like on here, only because I can't run it dry. I'm not gonna put together a temporary loop on this, but the lighting is in the ring that's around the reservoir right there. So it is kind of a side fire, not an up fire. So it would look really good. All kinds of plastic on there, so it has got a plastic protection around it. So anything you're seeing that looks like a defect in the acrylic, it's got like a rubberized protection on it. But anyway, if you're using any of the like opaque type fluids, or like what I was using in my system, it'd be nice because it'll catch that light and it'll sort of fade. But anyway, here's your connector. It's not a pass-through, which again is very disappointing, because if the fans can pass through and it's just LEDs, why can't these devices? Anyway, moving on, you have this override switch here where position 1 to the left is full speed. Ignore the software. You might ask yourself why. When it comes to filling up your loop, full speed is nice. It helps you move air easier, gets your reservoir to just move things as fast as possible, which really helps you bleed the system. And then once your system's bled, you can switch this position over to number 2, which is then gonna be iCUE controlled. And the kind of stuff it can use for iCUE control is coolant temperature. There is a coolant sensor in here, which is nice. Obviously, you can then set it to other temperatures, like the fan temperatures, like I've said, the CPU temp, GPU temp, motherboard temp, any sensor that iCUE can see, you can also use to control your speeds. You also have a return on the top, which has a push down tube, which is nice to get the fluid returning into the level rather than water falling down. The reason why you don't want a waterfall down is it can cause bubbles, and those bubbles can be picked up in the pump, and then you just end up aerating your system. And then this right here would be for filling the loop. You have an outlet and an inlet on one side, as well as another, it's either an inlet or an outlet on the other side. So you have 3 ports to play with, and then obviously all of your mounting hardware. At the end of the day, I'm happy to see Corsair doing something different. A lot of companies are just stuck in the same old norm where they're not really trying to innovate. I think this needs some work though. I do not like the way this block looks. I think in a horizontal position, this thing would just be extremely ugly. The fan blowing down is nice. This fan speed is also adjustable in IQ, so you can make it blow faster if you need. I think the cold plate's extremely thin for what it is. I'd much rather have this touch the VRMs too, but this is more universal, where this will work with all 4070 Ti's, more than likely 4070 as well, because they should be the exact same layout, because all it has to do is match up with where the RAM is and where the GPU mount is around the die. So this can mount to be pretty much any 4070, whether it be like say a Strix or an Aorus or Zotac, whatever, because they're all gonna be the same around the core. That's an NVIDIA design. So it's more universal, but it's also not, in my opinion, very aesthetically pleasing. Also too, you'll notice that the fittings only point out, which means you're gonna have to use 90s to get them up to where you need them. It's not a multi-port config like we've seen on some of their other block designs. The CPU block, pretty basic. Again, non-swivel or anything here, so you're gonna have to use 90s to get this into other positions if you need to. Because this is turning in right here, you need to be very mindful of how much pressure you're putting on this as you're bending your tubing, especially if you're using flex tubing. I have no idea how strong this is without breaking. I would just be gentle with it as much as possible. I don't understand why these don't have pass-through. And the reason for that is that, to me, that's the entire allure to the Link system is daisy chaining. But none of the HydroX stuff is daisy chainable, which just defeats the purpose. For the only thing that's daisy chaining at that point is the fans. Most of the time, what cluttered up the system for Corsair was the fans, because each fan had 2 cables coming off of it, and you couldn't daisy chain them. So if you had 11 fans in your system with radiators and stuff, you had 22 cables alone for the fans. So this is a step in the right direction. HydroX, though, unfortunately for me, is more of a lateral move where now you've got a thicker wire than a typical RGB wire coming off of it. So give and take, in my opinion. All right, guys, there you go. Sound off down below how you feel about this. It's not cheap, but it takes time for some of this stuff to, I think, maybe sort of iron itself out. And Corsair said they were keen on getting my opinion on it. My opinion is not overly positive. It's just okay, to be honest. The fans, perfect. I mean, that's how my system for the Expanse was able to work out so well, because the IQ Link literally saved me, because that motherboard only has one ARGB header, and I was able to use Link for the fans without utilizing that header. So I could have different effects going on. This, unfortunately, is not what I thought it was going to be. All right, guys, thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you in the next one. I got a big mess to clean up now.